All in Sports Talk, you can find it, basically allinsportstalk.com, where we stream live 24/7 soccer talk radio, basically. We've gone out, we've assembled what we think are some of the best soccer podcasts in North America, primarily, usually based in the United States, because that's where over 70% of our listeners are. And we just, you can find it allinsportstalk.com. You can go Google Play or Apple App Store and download our free app. And anytime you want, with just the press of one button, you could be listening to, some of, like we said, the best soccer podcasts out there, 24/7 soccer talk.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we are so glad to be joining up, so we're excited to see where it takes us. But let's talk about on the field. We got Toronto hosting Columbus in a massive game Wednesday night, 7:30 Eastern Time. If you're in the U.S., you can find it on Fox Sports 1. Toronto is favored. You're getting Sebastian Giovinco, Josie Altidore back in the starting 11. How's this going to affect, going forward in the attack, and what do you expect Toronto to push for a goal, or are they going to sit back and kind of take it easy?
I'd be pretty surprised if they sat back, to tell you the truth. They sat back in Columbus. They set up as a 4-1-4-1, which is a formation we've never seen them play before. In 3 years under Greg Vanney, they've never played that formation. And they did that largely because their primary goal was not to concede on the road against Columbus. We saw Columbus, sort of egg Atlanta into opening up against them, and they advanced against them in the knockout round. We saw Columbus egg New York City into opening up against them in the away leg, where New York City conceded 4 goals to Columbus in Columbus and put themselves in a very deep and dark place. And so Toronto went to Columbus with no Josie Altidore, with no Sebastian Giovinco, played a very basic formation, a very defensive-minded formation, with just a lone striker to St. Ricketts up top, very little service to him. In fact, they didn't even have a shot on target the entire match itself. And now they come back, and I think they're happy with that. But I'd be very surprised if that's their mentality in this match here, because at BMO Field this year, we've seen Toronto FC really play on the front foot. And given the fact that if Columbus score 1 goal, the only scenario by which Toronto FC can advance is by winning the match itself, I don't expect them to sit in or to let Columbus have the ball. I would be very surprised. Instead, I expect Toronto to really be the aggressor and to look to get the first goal, an early goal, and to score multiple goals. We saw them on several occasions, and I actually mean several, not just as in more than 2 or 3. I mean actually several occasions this season at home. They scored more than 2 goals. So look for Toronto FC really to come out flying and to try and put the game away early as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that I can see that as well. And actually, Steven, I know, Steven, you remember, I actually said that they would come out in the four back line. But do you see Greg Vanney reverting back to his 3-5-2 because he's healthy now? His team is full strength. Was that 4-1-4-1 just there for just because of the absences that they had within the roster?
Yeah, I think so. I would be surprised if they didn't play 3-5-2 for this match. I think they wanted the extra body in the midfield. They liked what they had against Columbus. They wanted to sit with Michael Bradley as one holder in front of the back 4. And they actually the extra midfielder that they added in Columbus was Nico Hassler, who's from Liechtenstein international player, who is actually a wing back for this team. So he played his first minutes actually in the midfield. He hadn't played a single minute in the midfield for this club all season. So that's the first time we saw him in that role in Columbus. This team is best in under Greg Vanney when they play 3-5-2. All their bodies are healthy. I would be very surprised if you didn't see them come out and play their best 11. And that best 11 is exactly like we talked about: 3 center backs with Drew Moore, Mavinga on the left side, very likely Eric Zavaleta on the right side, the wing backs of Morrow and Beitashour, and then your midfield will be Delgado with Michael Bradley, Victor Vasquez, and then up top you'll see Giovinco and Josie Altidore.
Steve, do you think Columbus could really, score early? Because we saw them go into Atlanta, into a hostile environment. The first time Atlanta has hosted a playoff game. They sent that to PK. Stefan stood on his head. They went through. Then they took care of NYCFC. Could they, do you think they could do something against this historic Toronto side?
Sure, of course. Anytime you get yourself in a situation where you're playing 90 minutes and winner advances, anything can happen. You could have a red card, a guy can slip and fall. You could have a pen awarded or a PK awarded. Someone who's very important to your team early, like one of your center backs, could get a yellow, and all of a sudden they have to be a little more hesitant. A million things can happen. We saw Montreal come into Toronto late in the season and put 5 goals past this TFC team. We've seen them have a bad night at home. Toronto FC against New York Red Bulls, even in the last round in the home match. I mean, of course, they had 2 goals called back for very strange and bizarre circumstances, but that could still happen. And they conceded a goal off a deflection. I mean, anything can happen in 90 minutes. Plus, as you said, it's not like Columbus is a bad team. They're one of the hottest teams in MLS, since basically August 1st. And as you mentioned, they handled Atlanta, they handled New York City. Very bizarre circumstances. Everything went perfect for Columbus for that to happen, but who's to say it can't happen for 90 more minutes? I could see a situation where Columbus gets an early goal. Kamara, let's say, finds a little bit of space and gets in behind the back line, and before you know it, they're up 1-0, and now they just sit back, and then Toronto really has to open up. However, I think if you were a betting person, how would you bet this game? I think that even the neutral would put their money down on Toronto FC to win, but in 90 minutes, anything can happen, and because Columbus didn't concede the away goal to Toronto FC, if they can find a way to get a goal anyhow in these 90 minutes, it will really stand this tie up on its head very, very quickly.
No, absolutely. But the advantage that Toronto has going into this, that they're playing at BMO Field, and me and Steven talk about it all the time, how we love the atmosphere at BMO, and we love just the home field advantage. It almost seems like that they have at that stadium. You've been there. How hard is it when BMO is at its full capacity for an opponent to come in and play their game without being rattled?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty cool place to be when it's jumping, and it's usually jumping. There'll be 30,000 there on Wednesday. The weather won't actually be that bad. It'll be around 35 Fahrenheit at kickoff, and so it'll be just a little bit above freezing. And that kind of suits the team pretty well. They're happy with that. It'll be loud. You talk about the crowd picking up the team. Last year in the Eastern Conference Final against Montreal, Toronto came back down a goal, but having 2 away goals, and they gave up a very early goal right away to Montreal. So Montreal immediately, got on the front foot, and we saw Toronto come back after the 75th minute and score 2 important goals to actually push themselves through the finals. And the place was jumping and happening. You talk to Michael Bradley, you talk to any of the players and any of the coaches, and they'll tell you there is something magical in the air at BMO Field. The supporters are really some of the best that you see. It will be loud. But I was in Columbus last week. I was at the Columbus match, and it was loud there. The Columbus supporters, full credit to them. I thought that they were into the game. They were very loud, and they were right behind their team. I was with Toronto when they traveled to Atlanta for the final game of the season when they set the single season points record. And that Atlanta crowd they were loud and they were jumping and they were happening. So I feel like the MLS game is changing, and that a lot of these stadiums are really generating some really solid home field advantage. And while I'd like to say that Toronto has an advantage playing at BMO, I think the real advantage of being the home seed is that you have the opportunity to play the first leg away, nick an away goal, and then come back with that in your back pocket. Toronto didn't get that on the road. And so if you said to me in January, coming into the season, Toronto FC would get to play the final week in November at home, 90 minutes at BMO, win, and they move to the finals, I think anyone would have taken that, including the players for Toronto FC, and that's where they are right now. But as far as like a real home field advantage, I think not getting the goal in Columbus probably negates that a little bit.
Got a final question here, and it's a 2-part question. What pressure is on Toronto? And I don't know if you had any comments on the Bradley comments that he made after last week's game in Columbus about, I guess, the hashtag Save the Crew movement.
So let's talk about the Bradley one first. So I was there. I was standing right there next to Michael Bradley when the question was asked. And I think that a lot of the commentary on it that's coming from people are people who don't talk to Michael Bradley. I talk to him basically every single week covering the team. And I think a lot of it's sort of being blown out of proportion. I think his comments were very fair. First of all, I think they were very honest, and I think they were very fair.
Yeah.
I raised my eyebrows when he said them because I was surprised. Because Michael is usually, if you've ever seen him in interviews or spoke to him, he's very, I don't want to say guarded, but he's very, precise about what he says. He measures each statement in his head, I think, before he says it out loud. And so when he offered that much information about Save the Crew, I was quite surprised to hear him be so honest about it. But I thought his point was actually quite fair, and that is that there's a series of circumstances here that have created this situation. It's not. He didn't say that Precourt's not to blame, or that the fans are to blame, or that Columbus is to blame. He said none of that at all. He actually said, "I'm not there. I'm not here in Columbus, so I don't know what the whole situation is. So I can't comment on who's to blame." But he also furthered that by saying, "But let's be honest. like the stadium in Columbus is not up to like where it needs to be with the other stadiums around the league and where the league is going. And so Columbus as a whole, so whether that's the supporters, whether that's the ownership, whether that's the city and the city council as a whole needs to come together, and they need to basically come into 2018 if Save the Crew is actually going to be the proper movement that it needs to be. And he said he felt bad for the supporters, and he said no supporter ever deserves to lose their team. But at the same time, Columbus needs, it was the first franchise, but now we're at 2018, going into 2018, and the league is different than it was before.
Yeah,
and
right, absolutely.
Columbus needs to keep up with it. Those were the comments that he made. Now, Michael Bradley right now, everybody wants to throw daggers at Michael Bradley.
Including me. I was on that boat.
They're happy to find all the ammunition that they can get to really make it a bigger deal than it really is. I thought it's, like I said, I thought they were very honest. I thought they were very fair, and I also think it's a lot of it's being blown out of proportion. I think if that wasn't Michael Bradley, if that was any other player on the men's national team other than Michael or Josie, I think it would have been pushed aside. I think if it was any other Toronto FC player, nothing more would have been made of the comments. I think more of it has to do with Bradley than the comments themselves. As for the pressure on the team itself, I mean, the pressure comes from them. They themselves have said over and over all season long that their goal is to win the MLS Cup, and that if they don't win the MLS Cup, not that none of the rest of it matters, but it just won't be the same. They were there last year. They had that game against Seattle where they wanted it. They felt like they were the better team across 120 minutes. They didn't concede a shot on target across 120 minutes. And then they get to the penalty kicks. Michael Bradley misses a pen, Justin Morrow misses a pen, and before you know it, it's all gone and the moment is lost. They focused this season from the very beginning on being the best team on the pitch every time they stepped on the pitch for 90 minutes. They wanted to win the Voyageurs Cup, which is the same as the U.S. Open Cup, but in Canada, and they won that. They wanted to win the Supporters' Shield, and they won that. They wanted to set the MLS points record, and they've won that. But, I mean, I spoke to Josie a couple weeks ago just one-on-one, and he said, really, quite simply, if we were in Europe, we would have already met all of our goals because the goal is to win it across the season. But in America, or North America and Canada, the winner is who holds the MLS Cup at the end of the playoff. And for them, that is the only thing that matters. So is there pressure from the city? I don't really think so. I think people, want to see them win, that we're passionate about it. They're deeply invested in it. But, they were there last year and they lost it. The real pressure right now is coming from within that dressing room because, I don't think that they can handle not winning it in back-to-back years, getting that close, being this good, pushing this hard for this long, and then falling short again. I think that would have a really, sour taste. And maybe I don't think they blow up this team if they win, but I think if they lose again, you might see some bigger moves that people wouldn't expect.
Oh, interesting.
That's really interesting to hear. Now, Steve, on the show, we do something, a little shameless plug, so you can plug away all your work, where we can find all your stuff, and where we can find all the things you write, and your Twitter even as well.
Oh, thanks, guys. So my Twitter is @_S Gennaro, Gennaro, or @All in Sports Talk, which is, the main thing to plug. I do a show every single week, TFC Talk, and that airs on All in Sports Talk, because I cover the team here, sort of day in and day out.
Right.
But most of my work is audio, and it all happens through All in Sports Talk, where, again, just like your show has now come on board, so welcome. In addition to really dozens of other great shows, our focus is on growing the game in the United States, in the American soccer market, and the U.S. soccer market, which has been a little more difficult in the aftermath of Trinidad, right?
Yeah.
there's been a lot of really angry American soccer fans. And part of that is the initial response has been really sort of to push away from U.S. soccer, but hopeful that there'll be a change at the top. Hopefully Galati doesn't get reelected in the spring. Hopefully we see new leadership for American soccer going forward, and we continue to see the growth that we've seen over the last 8 years, especially as far as listeners and followers of the game itself. And we see the grassroots continue to grow, and we see the men's program develop the way that it should. But a lot of things have to happen for that. But if you're interested in that, American soccer, MLS soccer, even EPL or Italian soccer or Spanish soccer, French soccer, but from a North American perspective, because you want to hear it from people who see it a little bit the same way you do, who are from where you're from.
Yeah.
Check out allstock.com, because that's kind of what we do.
Fantastic. Well, talk to you soon, Steve. Thanks again.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
Joining us to go the Columbus side of things is our man, Andrew Erickson from the Columbus Dispatch. Andrew, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, Andrew. Last time we spoke was decision day. But Columbus last week hosted Toronto to a scoreless draw, head into leg 2. What's the mentality of the squad?
Talking to a few players after the game, they mentioned that was an